Occasionally, I'll meet a tenant with an approaching lease expiration who will mention that their planned strategy is to negotiate directly with their landlord for a renewal. This is typically not the best method to get the lowest rental rate and optimal terms. Although some tenants may think that going it alone is a smart move, here are 5 reasons why it almost never is. Number 1, leverage. If you have not hired a professional, the landlord knows you're not serious about moving, period. Over 95% of significant commercial leases, anything more than just a few thousand square feet, use a professional tenant representative when they relocate. It is virtually a necessity because of the complex nature and high cost of a move and the challenges of an imperfect market. Your primary leverage in negotiations is the threat of leaving, and without a professional involved, that becomes a very weak threat. Number 2, complexity. A commercial lease is thick, usually 30 or 40 pages, sometimes more, and there's not a word there by mistake. It exists to protect the landlord and shift as much financial risk as possible to the tenant. Accordingly, there are plenty of gotchas. For example, on a renewal proposal for a full-service office lease, the landlord will often ignore any mention of base year expenses. So if your base year was set 5 years ago when you signed the original lease and you agree on a new rate with all other terms to remain the same, you'll likely get billed for excess expenses from day one in addition to the new rent that you've negotiated. Not good, and there are plenty more examples like that. Number 3, legal advice. Some tenants think that if their attorney's involved, they're safe. Certainly, a good attorney is invaluable if they're a real estate attorney, and they're there to negotiate legal terms, not business terms. It's up to the tenant to arrive at the business terms. Don't expect your attorney to know what the current market is offering in respect to rental rates, market escalations, free rent, operating costs, or customary tenant improvement allowances. Number 4, core competency. A landlord's core competency, their only reason for being in business, is to maximize the income from their rental properties. They have an unfair advantage because it's their primary business and it's not a full-time profession for the tenant. Further, virtually all institutional grade landlords hire professional leasing agents to represent them. It is surprising that otherwise smart business people who would never think about being involved in, say, a legal dispute involving hundreds of thousands or perhaps millions of dollars without professional legal representation might consider obligating their firms in a lease for those same amounts without professional real estate representation. And finally, fees, number 5. Some people think that getting a tenant representative involved will either increase their cost or that they will save the fee by negotiating it out. Let me dispel a couple myths here. First, brokerage fees don't increase rental rates. Rental rates are set by market pressure. If a market value is $20 a square foot or whatever, the landlord's costs are irrelevant. If every other landlord will offer a comparable space with new carpet and paint and pay the advisors at that $20 rate, then the landlord with a carpet that needs replaced and no broker can't tell prospective tenants that he or she expects $22 to add those things in because the tenants will just go elsewhere. The market sets the rate, not the landlord's expenses. And secondly, some tenants think they can negotiate and capture part of the brokerage fee. In over 30 years in the business, I've never actually seen it happen. Commercial real estate works the same as residential. If you list your house at Century 21 and Keller Williams brings the buyer by, they just split that fee between them. But if a buyer calls off the sign or walks in off an open house, the Century 21 agent doesn't rebate half that fee to either party. They just make twice as much. While the tenant may negotiate to get the rate dropped a few percent and think they're capturing that fee, they're never privileged to the actual document between the listing broker and the landlord. And virtually 100% of the time, the landlord's agent is likely getting a full fee and the landlord is the one cutting the price. They probably would have dropped it far more if the tenant had a good representative. If a tenant wants to capture half the specified fee, the best and likely only way to do that is to hire a representative who will move it to your side of the table. Like a good auctioneer, a professional representative brings out the serious bidders, and that market pressure assures the tenant of the best possible pricing. There's a reason that all Fortune 500 firms use professional representation on their leases. It saves them money, saves them time, and reduces risk. You should too.